Good evening, all, and welcome to Kalbardr's Corner, as we dig into our psyche, touch some toe beans, and unpack some shit. I'm Baron Kalbardr Gellir, and for this book, I have a new co-host. I'm joined by a former Meridian turned Atlantean, the TARDIS traveler that's been stuck for a good bit now. Please welcome Ouyang Taishi. Hey, buddy.
Hi, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
So we just realized before the show, you literally just dropped the bomb on me that you haven't been on my show in like a year now, but it feels like it was just yesterday.
You know what? It does kind of, but we've done a lot since then. I moved.
It's true. You're in a whole different kingdom now. You left me. You don't love me anymore. That's what this is. So I've got to get further away from Cal. I'm going to go to Atlanta and leave him alone.
I'm not that far. It's
okay. True. And I gotta come up there anyways. I have some new friends in Atlanta. I have to come visit now. I have old friends in Atlanta. I have to come visit. So it's gonna have to come. It's gonna have to do it. All right. So we have some things to talk about tonight. So let me do a little what this series is. So for those new to the series, we haven't done one of these in a little bit. So Helga and I started this series, but it's all about a book. So we pick a book, we read the book in chunks, and then we're going to dissect our thoughts sort of throughout. This is going to be very much a hodgepodge. We're going to get through it, right? Ouyang asked before we started, do we have a format for this? I was like, no, there's no formats. We don't have structures. What are those? So if you're doing a read along with us, if you have read the first section, please feel free to include your comments in the comments of the chat. If you have questions about either the book or anything we say or any of that, drop those out there along with your names and titles and whatnot, so we can address those. And if we don't get to all of them during the stream itself, we can follow up, or maybe something we want to touch on at the end, that sort of thing. Cool. All right. So today's book, Art and Fear. It's the Art and Fear: Observations on the Perils and Rewards of Art Making. Big long title. So tell me about the book. What is this book for you? Where did it come from? Give me the history.
So, I come from a long line, a big family of people who make art. And I was having a struggle. I don't even remember what the exact struggle was, but I was talking with my brother about it, who is the only one that I can think of in recent memory that actually went to school for art, actually went to an art school. He recommended this book to me. And apparently it's one that I don't know I can't remember if he said they actually had to read it for a class, or if it was just a book that got passed around, amongst his art student, buddies. And I can see why, having read it now. It is, and we'll talk about it. It is really, it speaks to art brain, and all of the things that make us artists a little quirky, and especially when it comes to our relationship with our work, and that struggle. So I was very thankful at the time, and it was fun too. The first time I read it, I actually got a copy out from the library, and somebody had left a lovely bookmark in the shape of a feather in my book.
Oh, nice.
And it was super nice. And I know you had told me that you got a used copy.
I did. I always try to buy a used copy, especially for stuff like this, because I like seeing what's already in them. And first of all, they're usually cheaper. I can get it for $3 or $4 off Amazon.
That being said, it's not an expensive book. It's really cheap.
Yeah, the new copy was $8. So get one of these. And it's super small. It's 120 pages with the postscript. So it's not a very long book. The back calls it an artist's survival guide. I think that's an interesting little tidbit there. So my initial impression when you first pitched this book to me, I looked at it. I was like, so I'm not an artist. Let me say that. And I felt all the daggers from all the laurels in the room. I get it. We discussed a little bit before the show. I don't consider myself an artist. So when I looked at this, I was like, I don't know. All right, screw it. Let's do it. Right. Because I've started trying to come to terms with myself as an artisan, and that's usually how I term it. Especially from us in the medieval capacity in the Middle Ages and all that. Artisans were both artists and craftsmen. The term artisan was sort of multi-use for that. So I like that term better than artist, because I don't see myself doing art in the traditional sense. And we discussed it a little bit, and we'll get to some of that as well. So I was concerned initially. So as I'm reading it, I'm translating a lot of that in my head from art to artisan and art in sort of my art style. And what I consider my art style. all the graphics for the show, this stuff, all these backgrounds, that's all stuff that I do that's in art. If you want to call it that, and we can argue about that later. But you're right, it is.
I don't want to argue about it.
Right. It is some form of art. I'll agree with you. But so that's how I viewed it, and I'd like to anybody who's out there watching, sort of in your head as we're discussing these things, make that transition for yourself as well. If there's something, if you don't consider yourself as an artist, transition it to your craft, your art, your fighting, whatever thing it's relevant that's your art form in this case.
Well, and one of the things that I like about this book, I can't remember. I know one of the authors is a photographer as well as a writer.
Right.
I don't remember what the other one is, because they obviously they wrote it together, so you can kind of just get bits and pieces there. But it applies to so much. It applies to painting. It applies to really any kind of art, whether that's writing, photography, paint, anything you make, anything right. that didn't exist and then you made it exist. And that.
Ooh, damn it!
Sorry.
I
told her I'm not gonna fight about it.
I was like, this will be good. Ouyang's not gonna push my toe beans as much. She's and we're 8 minutes in, and you come at me with that.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no, this is what we're doing. All right, that's where we're at. All right, cool. That's just gonna prepare myself here. So
okay.
Damn. All right, cool. All right, no. All right,
I can't give you warnings. That
happened. That's there. All right, so this book is written in 2 parts, and we looked at it, it's like that's a good spot. Let's just stop there. It's about a halfway point. So the 2 parts, which I thought the titles of the 2 parts are interesting. So obviously, the introduction and the nature of the problem is the first section, which is the section we're covering tonight, and then the outside world concepts is the second part.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really so. Today's thing is the nature of the problem and sort of
all the
internal fears and things. Mm-hmm. That to me was interesting. Again, interesting division point, right? And I'm trying to like conceptualize what the author was looking at for this, and that was like he did an internal and an external view of it, or they did, I guess. Since it is a 2-parter. So. All right, so I guess let's just dig into it. I'm sure we'll have if not, we're just going to keep chatting, not actually get things done here. All right, so we've made highlights throughout the book, and so you can see that. Look, yes, I drew my book with marker because I'm a savage.
How's are pink and mine are green and yellow. I'm humored by this.
I also turned down the corners of my books and
do that too, man.
Creased them, so
what?
Books are used.
I was a librarian for over 10 years, and I dog-ear my books. Come at me, bro.
That's right. Come at me, bro.
Come at me, bro.
All right, so my first quote. We'll just start with here. Well, there's a preceding bit to this, and then the actual quote. So the bison on the wall is someone else's magic was the preceding quote, which hit me initially because my father has a painting on his office wall. It's carried from office to office of a buffalo that I painted in like the 3rd grade for him. It's like the sponge painting, like with and he's had that painting, and it's still got gum stuck to it from when I was a kid that I actually stuck gum to it, and it's still there. I'm 34 now. It won't come off. It's a thing. It's there. It's gum. It's still there. But the quote that follows that is, making art now means working in the face of uncertainty. It means living with doubt and contradiction, doing something no one much cares whether you do or not, and for which there may be neither audience nor reward.
I also highlighted this section.
Yay!
Well, because it comes after a discussion about how, and from a skating perspective, in skating period, people were shored up. They had the church. They had, all of these things that they were they had a context that they were creating art in. Right? Like we think of like, oh, these great pieces of art, and they are, related to Christianity, if we're looking at Western art, or they're related to, the mythos or the sagas of their heroes and, various, all of the cultures, right? We're looking at the manuscripts, we're looking at statuary, we're looking at all of these things. Right. They had that support system that was, oh, you got commissioned to make this thing, and now this, it still exists, years later, even artists who were making things, long after the fall of the Roman Empire and the age of the Greeks, related to Greek mythology, all of that still is there, right? Because they had that part of society showing them up. That doesn't really happen anymore, we were talking a little bit about before the show started about how one of the big changes between, that era of art, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, all that, and today is that now art is seen as self-expression.
Right.
And it didn't used to be. That's a very modern concept when it comes to artists and art. We talk about it a lot in the Scribal community, the concept of tracing, and for those of us who, spent our middle school days hunched over a sketchbook, drawing furiously because that's what we did. We were the art girl. That was our identity. That's what we did. Tracing was like this horrible thing, like to be accused of tracing. Oh, how dare,
Yeah, no, I like from like when I was in high school and in middle school, like if you were an artist and traced things, you were shunned at that point.
How dare, right? You're not a real artist. You didn't do that work yourself. Whereas tracing for millennia was a totally 100% acceptable means of learning how to do a thing, and then obviously transfer that idea from one form to another form. Anyway, I've kind of rabbited hole already.
That's gonna happen. Just get rid of that, yeah.
But no, I think that it modern art in the modern perspective, and to be fair, I know that this is a Skadian channel. It's later on that I highlighted it too.
Right.
We are who we are in our present moment. There is absolutely nothing that we can do to remove ourselves from that context. You might be recreating something that was initially made or doing something in the style of something that was done in like the 13th, 14th century, wherever the hell. Sorry. But that doesn't mean that you're not still you living in 2022.
Right.
You have access to different materials. You have a completely different context.
Right.
So yeah. So that means
our whole art concept is adjusted by our current. Like we can't unlearn who we are as people.
You can't unlearn it, and you can't take yourself out of the context that you are currently living in. You're still you. I don't play the persona game because I'm always me.
Right.
I go by a funky name. Of either Leia or Ouyang, depending on what's going on that day. But I'm still Marty. Like I'm still me. I can't not be me. Anyway. All that to say, art is very isolating, and I think that that's what this is getting to. It is because you're in that doubt and then on that uncertainty, and it's so easy to forget that the person that's also doing art, whether they're next to you or down the road or in the next shire, is dealing with the same stuff too.
Right.
So.
There's something in this because obviously this is written, for modern artists, not Skadian artists, right? So it talks about there being neither audience nor reward. I think we're fortunate in the SCA to have an audience, have sort of a built-in. We have artists in S fairs that we don't have to like set up ourselves and pay to get into and all that, and we have judges that come to those things, and we have laurels. We have the laurel path as a reward, right? And whereas, it's not an exact do art get reward system, but at least there's a system. Whereas if you're an artist, like, in the modern world, you don't have that.
No, it's just a different structure. But, and we're skipping ahead, Cal.
Okay, all right. Go back, Cal. Go back. Sorry.
Put a pin in that. Because there
is
something to be said about the Skadian, talking about art and sciences, the Skadian laurel journey, and proper goal setting, because goals are good.
Right.
Goals are good. However, if you don't set the goal correctly, once you reach that goal, you can find yourself in a heap of trouble. You know? So yeah. Anyway, but no, you're not wrong. I think that it's still something that, because how many times have you seen somebody enter an ANS fair and either nobody comes by, right, because they're busy with their other stuff, or if it's an actual judged fair, they get feedback that they weren't maybe expecting, or that was maybe delivered a little bit too harshly, or that they weren't ready to receive. Right. And then rather than that shoring them up and teasing out those threads that they can then follow down and do more with, it leaves them feeling, like they didn't have a positive connection to their audience.
Sure. Well, yeah, and notice I didn't say good audience or a positive audience, but there is an audience.
It exists. There is an audience.
Audience exists for it, at least. Yeah.
The audience exists, and it's arguably an easier audience to deal with than just the internet.
Right. The internet's terrible, by the way.
Oh, God.
It's terrible.
God, I hate the internet. Why do
get on Reddit for 5 minutes and you'll hate yourself more. I promise.
No, but I mean, but even within that, there's art communities within that kind of try to carve out the audience, but again, it's a different kind of audience. It's a very broad thing versus us. It's very specific. So, and even within the SCA, we have our little niche things. People who are doing either a specific particular kind of art, whether that's like woodworking or leatherwork or armor making, which is an art. Armoring is an art. Mm-hmm. All of those communities, we bolster each other up. Scribal communities. There's a knitting guild in Atlantia. Did you know that? We have a knitting guild. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
Because knitting is in fact period. We found out.
It's period and it's art.
Yeah.
And but again, it is a community within a community that helps.
We are a hobby of hobbies, as they say.
Hobbies within hobbies. So. Yeah.
All right. What's your next point? Let's move along. Because we're already 17 minutes in. We've got one.
I highlighted just sort of from a contextual view, because the name of the book is Art and Fear, and it's defining what fear is in this context. It's not the scary, what's in the dark, or the 20 men that are coming down over the ridge at me. It's Conrad's view of fatalism, that it is a species of fear, the fear that your fate is in your own hands, but that your hands are weak. Mm-hmm. So it's that fatalistic, I'm me and I'm terrible, but I'm the one in control of this. Oh my God.
Right. Well, yeah, no, I think there's an admitting to yourself in that art, when you're doing art in whatever form you do art in, you have total control of it. And that is terrifying to me. Like, and Sifa brought it up in this show about, these shows are my art, right? These are my artistic expression. And that was terrifying. It still is, admittedly. That camera clicks on and my heart drops, and I sit here. This is all right. Some behind the scenes Kalbardr's Corner stuff here. When I finish every one of these shows, I have to go change clothes because I am drenched in sweat. Not because it's cold in here, folks. It's nerves. It is nervous sweat, right? That's terror.
You're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And we talked about a little bit about this before the show started, but you're putting yourself out there, and you don't know what kind of reaction you're going to get. You can maybe guess, but even then it's a guess, and that goes back to that audience thing too. But what I love about this book is that it continually hammers home, and I say it to my children all the time, you're the one in control of you.
Yep.
Like all of this it's an internal thing. It's a you thing. You can't control everybody else. There's a difference between viewing art and making art. And this is about making art. That's a completely you thing, has nothing to do with anybody outside of you. Just you. So.
Which, on that note, leads into my next point, actually. Making art provides uncomfortably accurate feedback about the gap that inevitably exists between what you intended to do and what you did.
Mm-hmm. What page are you on? Sorry.
And then page 4, leading into 5.
Yeah, got it. Okay, okay.
Yep. And then to you and you alone, what matters is the process, the experience of shaping that artwork. All right. So when I read this, I was like, to break that concept down for me was I put the art out there, and you as the audience do with it what you want. I have zero control over that. And that's honestly something Duke James said this last night, that other people's opinion of you is not your business.
No.
It's the very same thing. It's like other people's opinion in your art is not your problem.
So think about it too. When you're doing something, I'm a big fan of project journals. I will preach all day long about how project journals are amazing and everyone should have one, just because they're just do it. They're great. But you have been sitting with your project for so long, from its initial conception to its research, to whatever that looks like, to the initial, design, to the actual, maybe the first draft, execution, you have sat with that thing for so long, it inside of the in and out. It's when we say, oh, that's been your baby, like you You incubated that sucker for 9 months or more. It's yours. But so when it's done and you're not doing anything to it anymore, it's almost like a birth. It's like you go through almost like a postpartum phase. I say that as a mother of two. You go through like a postpartum phase where you don't want to look at it again. You're done with it. You're sick of it by then. But that's
kids. Yeah.
or you're going over every aspect of it, like, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is wrong. Like you're over obsessing over it. Right. But at that point that you're doing either one of those things or maybe both, that's the first time that somebody else is looking at it and experiencing it. And so your perspective of, we always say like you're always your own worst critic, because you've seen it through from the beginning. Versus, if Cal's looking at something that I've done, unless he's been over my shoulder the whole time, and oh good Lord, don't loom at me. You're seeing it for the first time whenever I show it to you. Please. Right. So you haven't seen that blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. Even if, one of, Sifa in your house, you're not in her head, all along the way, even though you're 2 feet from her. It's a different perspective. So yeah, you can't. So your thing is the process, not the finished piece. I love that quote. I love that quote because it comes up again and again, and it's the next thing I highlighted on this page. Your job is to learn to work on your work. Your job is to work, and your work teaches you about your work, right. Whether that's music or writing or painting or whatever the heck it is. Doing it teaches you about it and teaches you about you doing it.
What's funny is that this to me as a fighter, this also applies to fighting too. It's the same concept because like I can only control where my stick goes. Mm-hmm. I can't control where the other guy's shield's going to be. I'm moving my body and I'm working on the things I can make better. Mm-hmm. I can't make them defend less, right? It's the same concept. And I was like, again, if it hurt, don't get hit there again. Exactly. Now that hurt. Well, I'll do that again. All right, cool. Get hit there again. Learn to block, noob. Right? Yeah. Because right there, it's learn to block, right? It's the same idea. It's that you're the audience at that point.
Yeah. And the next bit, learning to block, don't get hit there again. The next bit that I have highlighted is one of the basic and difficult lessons every artist must learn is that even the failed pieces are essential. Mm-hmm. And the point you learn how to make your work by making your work, right.
You learn more from your losses, essentially.
You learn more from your losses. I love seeing it anytime, but I especially love seeing it in judged pieces, in ANS fairs, in competitions. I love seeing the false start. Show me where you started, and then, oh wait, no, that didn't work. And this is what I learned from that. Right. And this is either the new direction that I took, or this is what I plan to do next time. Because that tells me that you're not stopping. You're not quitting. Sorry, stopping's okay. Quitting's not. Right. You're not quitting. You're not giving up on it. It comes up later. Sorry, teasing. You found a new thread to follow. Right. So it's iterative. Art is iterative.
Yeah, it's so. As like just said, this is why I sometimes feel like everyone else's art is better. And you're right. And that's again, but you can't compare yours to somebody else's because you're experiencing your stuff from you and dealing your stuff from you and whatever. So especially when we're looking at it from an ANS perspective in the SCA, I think that journey, the process and that experience is actually much more important. Again, so when I'm producing art, right? So I do a lot of game stuff, and the thing I output is often not a thing. It's not really an art piece, right? Because I'm looking at like the process of how the games are played. Mm-hmm. So the thing coming out of that is not really a thing. It's
the thing coming out of that is you being able to beat anybody in 9-man Morris without
right. Exactly. It's we're talking about more than anything. So as someone who was my demo dolly for one of my presentations and got stomped on for a while, not by me, actually by Jurgen, but I appreciate you about that. You're welcome. But I think that's the thing. Part of what I did with that, though, is in looking at the research paper side and documentation, is that showing your experience and where you got from A to B. because for what I'm doing, the B isn't very interesting. The actual A to B is the more important part.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but it's watching because you're learning along with the person when it's presented that way. You know, you're like, oh yeah, that is a cool thing. Where do we go next? You know, how many pieces of pop nonfiction are out there that we've all enjoyed that are literally, you know, this effectively investigative journalistic style of, you know, I had a question about a thing. And so I went to these people and I asked them questions about it. And this is what they told me. And they showed me this stuff. And then I went over here and I did this other thing that was, you know, tangentially related to it. And you go on a journey. It's a narrative. We like narratives.
So coming from another
the process is important.
It's important.
But it's not just important as an output, you know, even if it's not something that you're going to present, because not all art needs to be like, not all art needs that big of an audience. Sometimes the audience is just you because it's teaching you about you and your art and how to get better, you know. And I do want to put this in there. That is not to say that you cannot learn from somebody else's art and somebody else's process. You can. But so in the Scribble community, so you know what white work is, right, Cal? In Scribble. Okay, so
I've done a scroll or two in my day. I have produced a scroll.
Just, you know, to cover all of our bases. So in a lot of Western European artwork, especially in like 13th, 14th, 15th century, white work is that lovely white line that you see on top of all of the colorful stuff that just sort of like a big highlight, right? It's hard to do. And when I first started doing Scribble, I would get advice from all corners like, oh, well, your paint needs to be this kind of paint versus that kind of paint, like, you know, titanium versus zinc, and it's got to be this consistency, and this is what you should put into it to get it to this consistency, or it should be that consistency, and this is how you do that. This is the kind of brush you should use. No, you should use this kind of brush. All of those things are valid things for the people who gave that advice, because that's what works for them. You know, they learned that for them to do white work and to get white work to look good for them, that is the tool and the process they needed to do, or needed to use. Does that mean it will work for everybody? No, it works for them. It might work for another person. It works for them. So that kind of sharing of ideas it's not, you know, it's about learning your tools, about learning your materials and learning how you work with those, you know. If you've ever picked up a brush, it's how you deal with a brush is going to be very different than how you draw or paint with a brush is going to be very different than how you paint or how you draw with a pencil, or how you draw with charcoal. The materials help dictate that, and your skill and I'm saying skill, not talent. Your skill with that material is going to be a part of that, you know, and you can get better at a skill.
Right. I was going to say, oh yeah, we know there's a talent. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We were on page 6.
Yep.
I know.
I've got one on 7 here to end out the first chapter. So, and this is an interesting thing. It goes back to the failing and flaws. Yes. Consider that if artist equals self, then when inevitably you make flawed art, you are a flawed person. It's like we think alike or something.
Yeah, almost.
And worse yet, you make no art, you're no person at all. So the first part of that is if you make flawed art, you're a flawed person because your art.
How dare you? That was bad, and you should feel bad. You know,
right? That was bad. You should feel bad.
That's bad, and you should feel bad. Yeah.
The last part of that hit me when you make no art, you're no person at all. So because I disagree with that, right? And you're supposed to.
Okay, but it feels that way.
Right.
And that's what he's getting at. It's not true. It's a brain weasel lie. I don't know if y'all know about brain weasels. They're the little weasels live in your brain and they tell you lies because they hate you. They're bad. We don't like them, but they exist. We try to drown them out. We'll put them back in their little box. We live with them. It's fine. But it is a brain weasel lie that if you do not do art, then you are not a person. Because to the person with the art brain, it can feel like that when you hit a block or a lull. It's you want to make a thing that doesn't exist. You want to bring something into the world, and either you have no ideas, or the ideas that you have get stalled for some reason or another. You know, executive dysfunction can play into this, lots of different things. But then you get into that spiral of I can't make art because of whatever reason. And a lot of times it's not even an external thing, it's an internal thing.
Right.
And because I am an artistic person, or I have I'm the art girl. If you've built that up to be your identity and you've wrapped yourself up in that identity, and that's not a bad thing, when you don't produce art, then are you a person? Right. Like it's a very, very internal thing, and it's hard to deal with. And the answer is, yeah, you're right. You are still a person, even if you don't make art. And that's why I like lots of arts because the thing that art teachers would tell us back in high school or whatever, even middle school, you should draw a little bit every day, right? Keep the wheels greased, whatever you do, you should do a little bit of it every day. You're never going to learn to play guitar if it stays in the case all the time, but that doesn't mean that if that's your art, that doesn't mean that that's the only art you have to do. I didn't draw anything today, but I did some knitting, I kept you keep the wheels greased however you can keep them greased, and whatever is calling to you do. But it is a spiral, and it is a vicious spiral. And I think that part of the reason why I love this book is that it actually addresses that spiral, and it goes at those internal things of, separating out your work from your identity and having healthier responses to this fear. Which is why I like this book, and everybody should read it. And
I've seen a lot of art and service people in the comments. I don't know how many fighters we have watching. I'm in a fighting brain right now because I just got to fight yesterday, so I'm in a sort of that mindset. But honestly, again, it implies a lot, and I'm curious on your thoughts of this as a relatively new Laurel too. I've heard a lot of peers talk about when they can't do their thing anymore, and it happens. I think maybe more so to the Shiv and the. So
are you talking about like once you get your Laurel, you can't do the thing that you got Laureled in?
Or if you can't for some reason, so like
okay,
like you get knighted and then get older or break an arm or whatever, or you become a Laurel and for costuming, and then all of a sudden you got arthritis and can't sew anymore. Like, do you become no longer a Laurel? Same idea. Like that's
it's very similar. It's very similar. No, you don't cease to be what you are.
Yeah, the answer is no, but that's
that question is not stripped from you. You still accomplished what you accomplished.
Right.
And you still have one of my favorite people in the SCA is Mistress Maisie. And she was at my very first, dipping my toes in, not even my, this is my first event, but the event where I just kind of came and scoped things out, and she sent me home with I think 3 different books. Maisie's an amazing person and I adore her. Maisie does scribble. Maisie has trouble with her eyes, this is the thing. And it's harder and harder for her to do stuff. And that doesn't mean that she's no less an artist. That does not diminish her work at all. It just means that it takes longer for stuff to get done. It's still beautiful. Eventually I have a genetic predisposition to macular degeneration at some point, unless we have bionic eyeballs by then. Well, that'll be fun. That's something in my future. And is that going to mean that all of the experience and skills that I have gained up to that point are no longer valid? No, it just means that I maybe shift to a more teaching. Well, I already teach, but you know what I mean? You just shift more from a active production role to more of a teaching role and advisory role, and share those knowledge. If you think about, we were talking about art versus craft before the show started, and the essential, why we need to keep craft going and pass that along. But if you think about, sort of the idyllic, old school community or old medieval community, your elderly weren't necessarily the ones doing the thing, but they were the ones teaching the thing, because they maybe lacked the ability to still do it themselves, but they didn't lack in the experience and the wisdom in the doing of it.
There's a phrase that gets used, I think now as an insult, but again, it shouldn't be. The idea of art versus craft, right? The craft is often an insult, and it's mentioned in this book a couple times as an insult to artists. You're not an artist, you're a crafter, right? And I think that should go right the hell away. But the other one is those who can't do teach.
I hate that. That.
Insult. But think of what you just said. Those who can't do.
Okay, so that's the thing. I think that's probably how thank you for calling me out on that. I appreciate it. I think that that's probably where that axiom came from. I hate how it has been twisted.
Correct. Agree. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it is now used as an insult and shouldn't be.
Yes. And it shouldn't be, because if you can't do it anymore, let's respect, the years that you have. I'm not a quilter, you're right. If I, want quilting advice, I'm going to go to my relatives who are, much older than I am, who have been quilting for 50 years, be like, hey, I need some advice. I'm getting into this. What should I do? Because they have that experience, right. And I trust them to impart that wisdom to me. So.
Agree. There you go. All right. What's next?
My next one is on page 9.
Come on with it.
It's just the little quote thingy at the beginning of the chapter, and it's by Stephen DeStabler. Artists don't get down to work until the pain of working is exceeded by the pain of not working.
Which, and that concept comes up later in this chapter as well. Yes. That idea. So, I assume you have that other one. So let's.
I probably do. Yeah. But this bit is about, because the other bit that I have on this page is, those who continue to make art are those who have learned how to continue, or more precisely, have learned how not to quit. Right. Because it is different. And then it goes on to say, art is all about starting again. We talked about, you sit with this thing, and I like 9 months because, it fits with the analogy of birth and everything. But you sit with this thing for 9 months, you obsess over it, you do all of the things, and then you're done with it. And then, because you've exhausted that adrenaline, right? We all know that push, get the thing done, either because you're just excited and you're in the zone, or because it's got to get done for whatever deadline. Right. But you're push, get it done. And then it's done. And then you take that big sigh. And then it's really easy to stop and then not start again, which is why I love seeing, and I talk to people, whether, again, it's a formal competition entry or if it's just this thing that you did. If I walk up to you and I compliment something that you're wearing, whether it's a piece of garb or an accessory or whatever, and the thing you tell me is, thanks, that's really great, but next time I want to do this. Yes, that's what I want to hear. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the thing you're going to do next time, because I want to hear that you didn't stop. Or not that you didn't stop, because stopping's okay. I want to hear how you're starting again. Right. Yeah. Art is about starting. Yes.
We just had a comment actually about you, Ouyang. I'll throw it up on the screen here. Your enthusiasm and passion are so contagious.
Yes.
And a quick congratulations to Lenora, who recently got married. So her last name is today. So congratulations to her.
Mazel tov.
There you go. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point. The idea of there's a quote on the next page I didn't highlight, but something you said made me find it again. The artists quit when they lose the destination for their work. Right, the place their work belongs. That again, I think that leads back to the idea that it's the audience thing, right? So the work, I do art for me, I do work for me. So these shows, and I've said it before, are for me, right? This show, like this when Helga and I first started this series, her and I were going to sit down and read a book together, and I was like, fuck it, let's go on the internet, why not? But it's because it's easier for me to go back and watch it later, but also others might enjoy it, right? So I am a little altruistic in that, I guess, but ultimately, it's selfish.
You just happen to be sitting on the couch with us while we geek about a book together. It's fine.
Exactly, yeah. You're hang out with us, right? But that's the idea. So all this sort of started because I needed something to do. It was selfish. So that to me was the destination for my art. Mm-hmm. The fact that others get to enjoy it too is a bonus to me, and I think that's where I found that was so that I don't want to quit this. And there have been times where I was like, I think I'm done for a minute.
Okay, but then when I came to you and I said, hey, let's do this book. Or maybe did you come to me? I forget. However that happened.
So you commented
again with this particular series.
Right.
So you could have easily done that one book with Helga and then not done another one.
Right.
So
So you commented on the show I did with Countess Gwen about, because we're discussing art and the idea of perfection, all that.
Perfection is not perfect, or perfection.
And you pinged that. I was like, well, I guess we're reading this book. And I have another one, and I'll say this, I'll apologize to whoever put it in the comments, because I have the book on my nightstand still. That was recommended. It was one of Adam Savage's book. Again, it was an art sort of thing. We haven't done that one yet. We'll get to that one eventually. So I have another one in the line for this series already. So
yeah.
But that whole concept is
This page too has another, with individual artworks, it means leaving some loose thread, some unresolved issue to carry forward and explore in the next piece. That's sort of tying things together. And eventually, even that journey will end, and you'll have to move on to something else. But we're talking about destinations and those goals, right? And you mentioned earlier the whole from the Laurel journey perspective. And you hear all the time, in those discussions about peerage and goal setting and whatnot. And for the record, goals are good. You can want the cookie. It's fine. Please want the cookie. It's totally acceptable. But want more than that. Because if the goal is the peerage, once you get it, it's, your work's already been in the MoMA. You've already had your terminal show and graduated art school. Now what? So my goal currently is part of my epic timey-wimey garb project. And if you would like to come and join me, please feel free. It's fun. My TARDIS is stuck at the moment. But my goal was to create a skin out garment or skin out ensemble for an 8th century Chinese female aristocrat. Like, that was my goal, right? I haven't finished it yet. I'm still working on it. Right. I got pieces left to do. I'll get there eventually. But even after that, then I move on to the next piece. I get the TARDIS started back up again, and I get to move on to the next piece in the Epic Timey-Wimey Garb project. And maybe it'll be 9th century Persia. I don't know. I don't remember where we're going next. No, 7th century Persia. 9th century was somewhere else.
So you started this project, and as long as I've known you now, you've had that same goal. Yeah. And you've been doing bits and pieces, but you've done offshoot stuff here and there that were related to that. And you have since become a Laurel for that work. Right. Because it was, it wasn't the end. It wasn't the end. It was a stop along the way. Right. It was you're not made a peer. You're not made a peer. You are recognized as a peer. That's how that works. And I think that if as a society, because I know that there's a lot of emotions tied up into it for lots of different reasons, but I think that if we can, as a group, recognize that it's a recognition, good words, and not an evolution. It's not like, you earned enough. I don't know how Pokemon work, but you didn't just like you didn't evolve into the next evolution. I don't know. Help. You're not a Pokemon, is my point. I don't care. It's fine. It's fine. 40, it's great. New sticker, I am not a Pokemon.
You're not. but because people try to game it, like they're like, oh, I have to, did it, and then I'll be done, and then I'll be, I will accomplish this goal. Okay, yeah, then what? Cool. Now what? What's next? And I think that we see a lot of Laurels who they get recognized for their amazing skill and their artistry. And then maybe they don't do that thing for a little bit. They take a break and maybe they go explore pottery or metalworking or bardic, something completely different than the thing that they got recognized for. And that's awesome. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to explore new things. Just keep doing stuff. Keep starting again.
Right.
So, yeah.
There you go. All right. Next.
I had highlighted the killer of art students and dropout rate was the lack of continuing support system after graduation. So just to highlight that support systems are really important. So make friends with others who make art and share your in-progress worth with each other, and learn to think of as your destination, as opposed to a specific thing like that MoMA show or peerage. Because if all goes well, that thing will come to you.
Right.
It's a step along. It is a pit stop on your journey.
Right.
And you're going to keep going after.
So the concept of support systems is weird. That's the thing. And I'm going to toss a question at you here.
Oh.
So I've seen a lot of support systems for apprentices and squires and the up and comers, right? But none for those who have achieved their peerage.
Oh, they exist.
Okay, so
So So my support system, honestly, my support system has not really that. I mean, I had those apprentice groups, that's a sort of wider apprentice group that I was part of, but my support system is the same support system it's been since day one. It's the handful of wonderful people, some of which are peers and some of which aren't, or who are, you know, peers of various flavors. People who got elevated to different things, you know, around the same time period that I got elevated. Who are just your support system are your friends.
Right.
That's who your support system is. You know, your friends who are into either the same thing you're into or into their own things. And you're able to bounce ideas off each other, share those in progress works, get feedback that is, because how you receive feedback has a lot to do with who you're receiving it from. You know, if you're receiving it from a trusted source, someone who you know still likes you, you know, like you actually know this person and they can tell you the hard thing because they know that that they're not being mean, you know, like they're like, I don't like Ouyang, I'm gonna say this. No, like this is my person, you know. That's your support structure. Those people who can be honest with you. And mine arguably I have my scope creep prevention task force.
Which is important. And so you mentioned earlier about the sort of leaving the threads open for the next project. So as a project manager, I think
you're a project manager.
Because again, scope creep is a thing, and I've noticed a lot of people. My wife is terrible at this, and that's something that I've tried to help her with. I've failed miserably because I cannot. Her and I've realized we cannot manage each other's projects. It does not work. I can lift the box for her. I can move it from A to B. I can help her sort the stuff, but I cannot tell her how to do it, just like she can't do for me. It does not work. Now, if I need her to do something for me or vice versa, we can hand it to the other one and it works out great, but we cannot help each other.
Right.
But she has an issue where she has trouble finishing a project because for her, this leads to this, that leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, and it never stops.
Yeah. So having somebody who can help define that box for you, that boundary, is super helpful. Can you pull up Sylvie's comment actually? Because I don't want that one to get lost. Because yes. I don't have apprentices. I'm not ready yet. But yes, I mean, your support structure can be so many things. We learn from each other, regardless of, you know, any pretend rankings or whatever we've devised, you know. We learn from each other, you know. Any teacher who says that they don't learn from their students is either needs a perspective shift or is lying to you, because it's just not. I learned from my 8-year-old. I learned from my 4-year-old, like even about art stuff.
I was like, in Zippy's defense here. Hold on.
She teaches me things. Yeah. No, she does.
Too, but that's besides the point.
Like the thing with her is she's getting into drawing. She's discovering drawing, and it's wonderful to watch. And it's also coming alongside her learning to write. And so, you know, she was like, how do I draw a heart? And I'm like, I'm one of those parents, like, I'm not going to just draw the heart for you. You got to draw it yourself. Right. Like we're learning here. So I was like, okay, how do I describe in words how to draw a heart? How would you describe in words how to draw a heart to a 4-year-old? You've met my 4-year-old.
I have.
How would you describe to her how to draw? It's hard. You have to think about it. You're like, okay, so I ended up with a V because she knew V, like that was a shape that she knew, and then the birdie on top.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And then once she got that basic skill, then now her heart, she doesn't do it the same way now. She's, you know, she's learned that she's learned by working her work. She can, you know, draw chalk hearts on the patio all day long. And, you know, they all look a little bit different. So yeah, that support structure can look like a million different things so long as it works for you. Right.
Yeah. So there was and I agree, Genevieve, this may be a topic we want to look at as a coffee with Cal later, is if you don't have a support system that is, you know, especially as an artist, how do you develop that if your friends aren't those people, right? If you're sort of like, you know, in a
well, I think that's where those apprentice groups, that's where those special interest groups really come into play. You know, there's, whether they're on Facebook or they're on Discord or wherever, you know, where you can. Making friends as an adult is hard. You can get yourself
like Tinder, except for artists. Is that a thing we can set up? Maybe
we just have like not Tinder, just some sort of like social getting together app where it's just like, hey, I'm into this. Are you also into this? Let's go get coffee and geek out at each other. Yay! Anyway,
called Tinder, except for artists.
I don't know. I missed all of that stuff. Like I've never. Anyway, so yeah, but yeah, I think that's where those come into play, where you can find yourself in a space, whether that's like again a digital space like Discord or Facebook, or even in play dates. Perfect. Go to A&S night. Bring your stuff.
Yeah.
You know, take your stuff. Take whatever handwork you can to an event. I love artisan roads for this. You know, or those popular spaces where people are encouraged to come bring their stuff and just hang out and do the thing. Right. You know, from a Scribble perspective, scriptoriums are great for this, you know, because you're literally sitting around a big table, all of you doing Scribble. Not even all of you doing Scribble. A lot of people just drink. I've
been to a couple of scriptoriums. There's like one person who scrolls.
There's usually one or two people actually doing Scribble, and it's usually something for court. Right. And the rest of us are just trying to talk and shop. But the talk and shop is part of how you make those connections and you make those friends. But that talking shop can happen in a formal space. I say formal, a formal space like a scriptorium or class, or once you've met those people, it can kind of happen, you know, or you can be in somebody else's day shade or tent and be like, hey, here's so-and-so. They're also into that thing you're into. You know, I got to talk about Jewish folklore a little bit at Atlantean Coronation, and I totally wasn't expecting to, and it was awesome that I got to, because it was so cool. Anyway, you can't always plan them. It's wonderful when you can. Right. But I think once you find those people, again, it's building a friend network. It's building a support system. You get those group chats going. You know, you get those private, you know, Discords or Facebook groups together where you can carve out your safe space. Yeah.
That's true. All right. What's next? We have 50 pages left, and we're already at an hour.
Oh God, are we really? Oh gosh. I'm going to try to. So just to be said, there's a lot of. I've highlighted a lot of things in here. We're going highlight by highlight. A lot of it is reiterating concepts we've already talked about.
Yeah, feel free to jump if you need to, if it's relevant.
Yeah. But like the whole the fear that you're not up to the task. You know, that you're not a real artist. You know, or not a good artist. You don't have anything to say. You don't have any talent. You know. Because the making of the art gives substance to that. It feeds those brain weasels sometimes. Right. So it talks about that spiral. All
right. So there's one. I've got one on page 12. It's the box on page 12.
Oh, okay. We just talked about that. We just talked about the box.
Right. So I want to read that box real quick to finish out that section, because I think it's and it's super important. So this is the operating manual for not quitting. So we talk about making friends with others who make art, because I think that's super helpful. The other half is learn to think of the thing rather than in this case, MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, as your destination. So think of your art, not your destination. So it's, again, about the journey. I think that's a super relevant. That really summed that up really well for me, of how that worked.
Well, because it says, you know, if it all goes well, MoMA will eventually come to you. Right. If it all goes well, peerage will happen. Right. Because peerage is a recognition.
All right, continue on. Sorry.
So the next quote I had was on 14, and this is a brain weaselly line. Art is a high calling. Fears are coincidental. Coincidental, sneaky, and disruptive, we might add, disguising themselves variously as laziness, resistance to deadlines, irritation with materials or surroundings, distraction over the achievements of others, indeed as anything that keeps you from giving your work your best shot. Right. We separate artists from ex-artists. What separates artists from ex-artists is that those who challenge their fears continue, and those who don't, who quit. So it's hard, and I love that it's recognizing it's hard, right? But it's you gotta just keep going at it. Get back up on that horse. Start again. Right. So,
yeah. Again, it's you have to accept the loss, whatever the loss is. You have to accept the and work past it.
And I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit because I want to talk about materials, because that's the next little part. But the idea that every piece has to be perfect or every piece has to be like of X quality, no. You're going to make a bunch of stuff that's shit.
Right.
We all do. And that's okay. You know, I've known scribes who, I keep coming back to Scrabble because this is the easiest analog, who they make a bunch of stuff that never sees the light of day. It never gets submitted for a scroll case or as a blank. It's a thing they made. It maybe has some poetry on it. Practice your calligraphy with poetry.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you throw it in the trash. Who cares?
Put it on a wall. Give it as a present to somebody. Like,
even if you don't give it as a present, just do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just that the doing of it. And then I'm gonna go to the materials. Is the doing of it is what teaches you, right? And I'm gonna skip that. Because and this gets again scribal, but you can talk about it with sewing, with silk or linen or wool versus cottons and poly whatever blends. Fabric different kinds of fabric. Heck, different weaves of silk behave differently from each other, right? There's mechanical differences to how hand sewn seams versus machine sewn seams are going to affect the way the cloth, behaves. This is not to say that everything has to be 100% hand sewn, whatever. No, like I'm going to go back with Gwen on that. No, it's fine. Gwen's already, that horse is dead. But from a Scrabble perspective, the way paint behaves on Bristol is different than how paint behaves on pergamonata, which is even still different than how paint behaves on actual vellum. On actual parchment. So, and different than how it would behave on papyrus, different than how it behaves on cotton rag paper, which is a whole nother beef that I won't talk about.
Just set that soapbox aside for a second and we'll get...
We're not going to talk about cotton rag paper. No. Anyway, but it's so, and even with your paints, Reeves gouache, which is a very, very easy entry-level gouache that a lot of scribes start out with, behaves differently than Winsor and Newton, than M. Graham, than Holbein. They're different because they have different levels of pigment. So I encourage people, and this is not intended as gatekeeping. It is not gatekeeping. How you work, because you learn from your work, how you work with the materials that you have available to you is going to change when those materials change. The habits that you build, the muscle memory that you build are going to be dictated by your materials. What's the quote here? Materials are like elementary particles, charged but indifferent. They do not listen in on your fantasies. They do not get up and move in response to your idle wishes. The blunt truth is they do precisely what you make them do. And they can only do what's within their power to do. You cannot add more pigment to Reeves gouache. I mean, I guess you could, but why would you? Just go buy different paint. But so it's different. And when I don't want people to set themselves up for failure. If that means as a Laurel that I share some of my stash with you, so be it. Generosity is a peerage trait or a peerage quality. That's not to mean to say that, I can't give everything out because, within your means. But I love it when people put together Scribble kits for newbies. Here's some good stuff to get you started so that you're not. I'm trying to think of like it's a good analogy. I don't want to give you a ladder that only has half of its rungs.
Right.
Like
because you can get there. It's just a lot of harder. The journey becomes a lot harder for you.
Well, and then once you are able to access those better materials, you almost have to relearn everything because it behaves differently. Now, can you transfer some of those skills that you learn with the yeah, but Bristol drinks paint. Perg doesn't. Mm-hmm. So, you're also your materials are going to last a little bit longer if you start, a little bit further up the rungs. I have opinions. Sorry.
Clearly, that's a whole Perg versus Bristol conversation right there. No,
it's the cotton. I don't care about Bristol. It's the cotton rag paper that I get mad about. But anyway.
All right. So my next one's on 19 for talking about uncertainty.
Okay. Yeah.
And I want to hit this. So the materials, the whole concept of materials, I think, was really important. That I didn't play as much in that. Like the materials thing didn't hit me as hard because, again, my art style doesn't really use material. Mm-hmm. Like my materials, but admittedly, I guess the computer itself, having a reliable computer, that I guess that becomes my material.
You chose to use StreamYard as opposed to a different program.
Sure. I guess the tools are. Damn it! I hate when I contradict myself halfway through a damn sentence.
Isn't that great?
Because I'll start to say it and go, nope, I'm an idiot. I'm completely wrong here. Hold on, let me backpedal that one. All right. Anyways,
we're learning in real time.
Right. You get to watch me be smart. Okay, so but at the bottom of that page it says the truth is that piece of art which seems so profoundly right is in its finished state may earlier have only been inches or seconds away from total collapse.
I highly do that too.
To go to your Scrabble analogy, I think every scroll has an ugly face.
Every garment, every scroll, everything has an ugly face. You got to push through it.
Right. So yeah, exactly. Like you have to get past that ugly face because you think it's an ugly face because you've seen it for that 10 hours, 20-hour period. I've walked in on scrolls that Keisha's been working on for a couple hours, and she's like, "I hate this. This is stupid. Worst scroll ever." And I walk in that's amazing. What?
It's different. Okay, because executing the art is different than viewing the art.
Correct.
And not only has she been staring at it for several hours, she also has an idea in her head of what she wants it to look like and what that finished product is, right? And there's an earlier quote about. Oh, that's a little bit different, but it's about, we have that initial design. We want to do this thing. And so much of the energy of art is pushing through to that thing and not getting distracted by other new shiny things.
Right.
And it's holding on to the idea. But it's also in not just holding on to it, but also seeing it through. There was a thing that I think it was somebody in North Shield started. It was the UFO October. They maybe didn't start it. That's how I first encountered it, was when I was in North Shield. But it was the idea of, hey, it's October, finish something. You've got something that's left unfinished. And I think it initially was supposed to be an accessory. Finish it. But then it just expanded into a larger thing because we all have UFOs. And the thing with UFOs is they can be both an intimidating thing. Like, the more I know for me, if I have a UFO sitting, especially one that I've already started and is halfway through, it becomes the creepy doll on the shelf that stares at me. And I look at it and I'm like, that's that thing that I didn't finish. And then I feel bad about not finishing it. And then I don't want to finish it because I feel bad right now. And I don't want to do art when I feel bad.
I've done that with text messages before. I've done that with a simple text message on my phone. Or a response on a Facebook message, because it then takes me so long to get back to them that I now have anxiety about not responding quick enough. Yeah, it's the same concept.
It's the same concept. Yeah. And the worst part about it is when it's an expectation that is the latest one is my Matryoshka set for there's a there's a folk song that we sing around Passover called Hagadya, which is about a goat. And it's one of those stacking songs where, you the goat and then the cat eats the goat and then the dog bites the cat and the stick did it. It's the farmer in the dell, but with goats. And I was going to do this set. It was going to be super cute. And I got to wood, which is the one end after the dog. And then I stopped because Pesach started and I had other things I had to get done, right? Feed my family. But the only expectation, the only thing saying, you have to do this was me.
Right.
I was it. There was no outside force saying, this has to be done by, such and such time or such and such date. Right. So I think that if we just give ourselves a little bit of grace, both for those things that are sitting unfinished and also that thing that's right in front of us that we're trying to push through that ugly phase, give yourself as an artist and as a human being that grace. It's okay. Take a deep breath, push through. And, or for the one in front of you, for the one that's sitting on the shelf, you'll get to it when you get to it. You are free to adjust your own expectations of yourself.
Right.
You have that power. I bequeath it to you.
Fair enough. Ouyang says you have power, guys. Do it.
You have the power to adjust the expectations that you have of yourself. Yes. Okay.
I'm gonna chew on that for a minute. All right.
Yeah.
Come back to that. All right. What's next?
We were talking about uncertainty. We talked about materials.
Well, like I said, the uncertainty thing was the second can collapse. I read that I guess there's not a lot to talk about with it. It's just that idea. It's that ugly face happens, and every art you see out there. I think that's really more the important. That when you go to the ANS fair or you go to the Scribble thing or you see the scrolls pop up in court that are amazing, that had an ugly face too. Every one of those had an ugly face, and understand that at some point that almost failed.
So there's one of the final quotes in this section that I love is talking about how to deal with uncertainty, and control is not the way. Right. What's really needed is nothing more than a broad sense of what you're looking for, some strategy for how to find it, and an overriding willingness to embrace mistakes and surprises along the way. Mm. It's not going to be perfect, and that's okay.
Right.
You're going to learn from all of those things. And the next one, when you start again, see how I'm bringing it around? When you start again and you do the next one, you will bring all of those lessons that you learned with you to your benefit.
They use the word tolerance, I think, is important.
Yeah.
You have a tolerance for failure, have a tolerance for the process. Oh, yeah. And tolerance I think that's a great word for that learning experience.
Right. Well, and it's another thing too, us as art viewers, from the perspective of being members of that community, of that support, need to also remember that, this had an ugly phase, right. and that what we're seeing, especially if it's in a competition's structure, is the best that they can produce at this time, and it can only get better from here. Right. Even if it's amazing, it can only get better from here. This was great. I cannot wait to see what you do next.
Right. Yeah. All right.
So the next section what section was that? That was about. Was that art and fear?
The art and fear section. Yeah. So this is now fears about others.
No, fears about yourself.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Fears about yourself.
It's fine. I'm just skipping stuff. It's cool. Skipping a whole chapter.
Yeah.
So fears about yourself. So the first section of this one is pretending. Ow.
Well, even before we get to that.
Okay, go ahead.
I loved this quote. In a general way, fears about yourself prevent you from doing your best work, while fears about your reception by others prevent you from doing your own work. Which I think has a lot. It's interesting when we put it into an SCA context, but of course, because again, self-expression is not necessarily part of what we do in the SCA. Although you could, it's there. You can't get around it. It's it's still you. You're putting yourself out there. But when it comes back to your audience, you never know how it's going to be receptive. And if you play to your audience that hard, you're not going to be true to yourself. Right. Why did you make this color choice? Oh, because so-and-so told me to. Okay.
Which, I mean, if you're doing an art for like largesse reasons, right? You're giving it to give to a crown, then yeah, you may want to do, like, if I was doing it for Meridian, I'm going to do it more black and white than I maybe would do red and yellow, because it's more relevant for that, right? And sure, I think that's playing to your audience. That's still my art, but yes, it's more for that
audience. It loses part of you.
Correct.
In it. And it's not a bad thing. Again, this quote is very much more specific to sort of the larger, 2022 art world, although this was published in not 2022. This is an older book. To look now. First printing was 2001.
There you go. That's not bad.
Yeah, 20 years old. But still, I liked that because it's an authenticity thing. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, we can move on. The first part was pretending. I don't have anything.
Yeah. So fear that you are not a real artist causes you to undervalue your work, and I think this happens a lot in the SPA. The chasm widens even further when your work isn't going well, when happy accidents aren't happening or hunches aren't paying off. So, as an artist, I look at it when those things, when it doesn't go like I want it to, when things aren't coming out, when the thing isn't resolving, I see myself as even less of an artist. Like I am more of a fraud when I can't make the thing do the thing.
Well, that's that imposter syndrome stuff. And it ties into that whole, and it goes on to say, if you buy into the premise that art can only be made by people who are extraordinary, such down periods only serve to confirm that you aren't. Right. Art can be made by anybody. Right. The people who made the cave paintings of cows weren't like they weren't special. They were people. They were people. You know, the people who yes, talent, and we get into talent. Talent, all it does is bump you up a little bit in terms of skill, right? Like it's a privilege. Think of talent as like an element of a form of privilege, right?
It just gives you a better starting point. It
gives you a better starting point. Right. But if you don't cultivate those skills, okay, let's talk about Christopher Poloni, who, you know, or any number of, you know, child prodigy artists of some kind, right? Whether they are an author or a musician or something like that, you know, yes, at this age, you know, you wrote a series of books that have a very strong similarity to another series of books, but okay, cool. You had the privilege, it got published, and you got all of this notoriety. Cool. What next? You know, how did you take that level of privilege that you came in with, and how did you expand on it? You know, so we can talk about Mozart and how he was, you know, really talented when he was little. He still worked his ass off to develop that skill and do what he did. You know, he didn't rest on his laurels. You know,
I've tried sitting on one of those. They squirm a lot. So
it's prickly. Don't. It's that also. Yeah, don't no. No, thank you. So yeah, you still work at it. Because you learn from your work, you know, and maybe it doesn't mean you have less to learn. You just have different stuff to learn because your path is your path. I can't walk Cal's path. I can't. I don't want to. Your shoes are too big.
Really too big, yeah.
I mean, everybody's path is different. And yes, there might be some similarities based on, you know, where you live, what you're studying, whatever, but everybody's path is different. No,
that's an important piece of advice from in the associate peer relationship, I think, as well, that you're not going to be your peer.
No.
Squire, protege, you know, whatever, you're not going to become your peer. You're going to be you at the level or beyond of your peer. That's the goal, right? It's not like your goal is not to become them.
No. Good Lord. Can you imagine two of me bouncing around? No.
You know. I think we see that. Maybe we see it more. I'm less experienced in the art the artisans in the kingdoms as far as the relationships there, but like I see it in the fighting field a lot. That I want to be more like this knight. I want to be this knight. I want to fight as good as this knight. I want to fight like that knight.
But that's different. I want to fight as good as.
And I want to fight like that. And that's
I want to fight
the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what is like? I want to fight. What does that mean? You know, you want to have that same confidence and same level of prowess. You want to actually throw the exact same punches, or not punches. You know, sticky things. I want to fight. I watch fighting. Anyway,
the exact same sticky things. That's actually the technical term. Sticky things. Yeah.
The sticky things. Well, no, but I recognize that a lot of that is skill. It's technique. It's how you hold the shoulder movements. You know, we talk about when Scribble, you talk about, you know, pulling the paint, don't push the paint. You know, but those are those basic, you know, fundamental
mechanics
skills.
To it, right?
There's mechanics to it. Right. Learning your materials, learning how to work with materials. You know, how you make a sword, you know, for crown, how you train for crown, you know, all of those things. So yeah. We were on page 24. But yeah, I think you're allowed to feel good about what you do. You're allowed to do that, you know.
You're allowed to feel bad about it, I think.
You're allowed to feel bad about it, but you know, you at every stage in your journey, fellow art people who in middle school carried around your sketchbook, if you have the privilege of going back and looking at one of those old sketchbooks, I really highly encourage you to do so. Or if you, like me, were an early user of PhotoBucket and still know that login, go look at your PhotoBucket where you dumped all of those early scans and compare what you did pre-SCA. Compare what you did as a 7th grader to what you can do now. And I guarantee there's going to be improvement. There's going to be, you know, because you have grown, you've learned more, you've exposed yourself to more, and you have worked at your work and learned from your work and gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
You are a real artist, regardless of what you're doing. You know, that first birdhouse you built in Cub Scouts versus what you can build today.
Oof. Oh, hold on now. I made some pretty damn good birdhouses, though. Whew.
I've never made a birdhouse. So.
Yeah, pretty good birdhouses then. All right, so there's an interesting quote for me on the next page. As a games guy, I saw this one. I was like, I'm going to highlight this because it's a relevant thing. So it's discussing the sort of the what art is mentality, right? The how do you find it? Because art, as we've discussed in this, art, craft, artisan, those concepts are very just superfluous and really have no actual meaning.
They're very open. They're very
sure.
Open.
Okay, I'll give you that one. Thank you. Thank you for the correction. They're very, open to interpretation. And I think that's one of the things. Like when I started approaching A&S stuff, I went to the science side instead of the art side because that was a lot more tangible, and like I could look at it and go, "This is this is this." There is no question now, right? Mm-hmm. There is obviously we're looking at game rules. There's some question about how they exactly played the game, but we can at some point decide this is how we're playing this game today, right? Mm-hmm. So it talks about chess and says, after all, if there were some ongoing redefinition of what chess is, you probably feel a little uneasy trying to play chess, right? So if we're playing Nine Men's Morris and we're changing the rules every time we play, I'm going to be uncomfortable playing because I don't know the rules now,
right. Right. It's shaky ground. And art can do that. Right. Art can do that. And it's especially when you're talking about, obviously this is talking about sort of, we keep saying the modern art world, that, sort of like art in 2022, art in the 2000s. But I think that it still exists within an SCA context, like what is an acceptable, what kinds of things do you enter in ANS? What kinds of things do we recognize as art? I know that when you were doing some of your game research early on, it was hard they couldn't find a category for you.
Still can't.
Like, where do we still haven't found one? Because it was hard, because even our raw research paper type categories, that's already so broad, right. Versus like, how do you put games? Like is it the playing of the game? Is it the game board? Everybody wanted to make it the game board. Like it's right. not the game
That's
board.
not what I'm doing. Yeah.
It's not what it is. So it's hard when those categories start to shift, right? And especially when talking as somebody who does sinology research. I'm researching China, which is not. There's a lot of other people who do it. I've got friends. It's fun, but you meet a lot of people who are like, oh, I never knew about that, or like. And even within that sort of East Asian concept or context, I learn new stuff about stuff that's going on in Japan and Korea all the time, just tangentially from my support network because we share cool stuff with each other, Right. But bringing that into the larger SCA context from someone who doesn't have that sort of that contextual box, it can be scary. Mm-hmm. Like, what is this? And they may not recognize the artistry of it, right away. Does that make sense? Yeah,
it does. I think that, that's I think that concept exactly what I faced when I was initially doing that because there was no box to put me in.
There's no box to put it in.
Yeah. Which honestly was to me a little disheartening. I am very logically driven. It's why I enjoy our university systems because right. There is do X, Y, Z, get this right. Here's the path, and I can just go cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I saw the ANS stuff, and I was like, oh look, there's a rubric. Here's what I got to do. Here's a form for it. And then I got there, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna go sit down now. Thanks. And it's disheartening, and it still is. Like I haven't done another one since because I don't know what to do with that now.
Well, and that's the thing is, as somebody who loves ANS competitions, because my reptile brain, like yours, I love the format of the feedback. Mm-hmm. And first of all, I love face-to-face judging. I think that everybody should have face-to-face judging. It makes me sad that Atlantia doesn't seem to have it. If it has it, I haven't encountered it yet because I missed it. Because I love being able to talk with somebody about what they're doing, and I love being able to talk about what I do. But I love the ability. I love that feedback in that broken down the rubric, like, okay, I know exactly, someone else is helping me identify those threads,
right?
Those things that I can then take to the new project. I know what I see, but I have the structure that my viewer, my audience can also, because I am sharing that as much as my process as I can through my documentation and what I've written down, they can respond back to me with, okay, based on what you have shared, here are some things that maybe you can go further with. That to me is the entire point of ANS competitions. Right. It's not to see who made the prettiest thing. It's help me find the things that I can do better so that I can do better and I can start again and keep going.
It's all about working on the next iteration, you know?
It's all, art is iterative. You learn your work by doing your work. Keep starting. To that point, on page 26, you make good work by, among other things, making lots of work that isn't very good and gradually weeding out the parts that aren't good, the parts that aren't yours. It's called feedback, and it's the most direct route to learning about your own vision. It's also called doing your work. After all, someone has to do your work, and you're the closest person around.
So I had the last word of that.
Yeah, you're going to learn more from yourself, you're going to learn more about yourself and your work from your work than anybody else can tell you. Yes, other people can tell you cool things about it, especially with those structured feedbacks like we have with competitions, but the work is going to be what's doing the actual talking. They're helping you listen to it.
Right.
That's what that is.
I like that. The work is doing the talking. They're just helping you listen.
They're helping you listen. They're helping because you're talking about your process. You are voicing the work, the journey that they didn't see, right? Which is why that is what documentation is. Documentation is, yes, talking about the research and everything. It is 30 to 40% what that it is. That 60 to 70% of it is what went through your head while you were making it.
Right. Well, there's the what and there's the why.
Right. Why did you make that choice? Yeah. Why did you make that choice? Yeah. All of the brain gunk coming out. Which is why project journals are so important. Because if you didn't keep a project journal, notes to yourself throughout your process, when you sit down to do that documentation, and you're like, you don't know what to write.
Right.
Because you're maybe a month removed from when you finished it.
Yeah, you added that extra pinch of salt that you've now forgotten you did, or But
even that, you forgot like this part was really frustrating, or how did I actually fix that problem? I know project journals are awesome, and you should use them, even if it's just a hashtag on Facebook or Instagram. Use it. Right. Sorry.
we have phones. 90% of people have phones.
Thing, like little. And or if you take a picture of it, cool. You took a picture of it. You shared it with a buddy. Hashtag your message, whether it's on your texting or you're on Facebook Messenger or whatever, your DM, because most DM interfaces, I know Facebook messages will let you do it. You can search within that conversation, and if you search for that hashtag, hey, guess what? Now you have all that stuff. Yep. Sorry.
That's literally the purpose of hashtags as a computer person sitting here.
That's what initially the hashtag was for. So it's what they're still for. But anyway.
Hashtag still a pound sign. All right.
Sorry. We're getting into talent now.
Yep. Talent, perfection. Let's see.
Artists get better by sharpening their skills or by acquiring new ones. They get better by learning their work, by learning from their work.
I think they get better by learning to work and by learning from their work. Again, it's about the process, about that journey you learn from your documentation.
Learning to work, not only the fundamentals, how you swing that shot, how you hold that brush, how you sew that seam, but learning from your work. What can you do better next time? The very first time I ever ran a sewing machine in middle school was one of those kids who pedal to the metal, just chugga, as fast as I could, right? It takes a lot of effort for me to slow the fuck down, in a lot of, just in general. But when I slow down, I go around curves a lot better, right? I am much, it's because I'm not fighting the machine, I'm making it go slower, I can be more precise, That's learning from my work. I had to make all of those mistakes to go, yeah, no, I really need to fix that. I need to adjust what I do in order to get the result that I want.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about the pottery story?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So in the perfection part, and if Gwen is still, I don't know if Gwen is still with us, I'm sure she will appreciate this. This is a well-known story, but it is in this book about the very, very first day of ceramics class. The teacher says, I'm not reading directly, I'm just giving you a paraphrase. He's going to divide the class into two groups, and one is a quantity group and one is a quality group. And at the end of the semester, the people who are graded on quantity have to make 50 pounds of pots. If they make 50 pounds of pots, they get an A. The people on the quality side, they only have to make one pot, but it has to be perfect. And so at the end of the semester, the best pots were from the quantity group because they spent the semester learning how to make pots because they just made a bunch of pots. Whereas the quality group sat around talking about how to make pots.
Yeah, they got one shot at making it, and it was not great because they didn't.
Well, they didn't necessarily have one shot. They just were only going to be graded on one,
right.
So they only made one.
Right.
So
at no point failed. They at no point saw the process. They at no point went through that journey. Yeah.
You get your hands in the clay to learn how the clay behaves. Learn how you behave with the clay. And that comes with making a crap ton of pots, which maybe don't look really good, but among them, you have some really nice ones. So, yeah. Oh, and I love this. Art is human, art is human, error is human, ergo, art is error.
Yep. Yep.
So, and to require perfection is to invite paralysis. Require perfection is to invite paralysis. There are so many things in this book that I just want like cross-stitched and like put up around my craft space or on stickers, maybe. I don't know.
I know a guy who has a store with stickers in it. You send me the quotes, we'll make that happen for you. I know a guy. Well, because on the next page, the perfect is the enemy of the good.
Yeah. Or the enemy of the done. Yeah.
The done. Yeah. That's usually the quote I use. Is perfect is the enemy of done. And that's, as a project manager, that's how I approach things a lot of times is, yes, when we finish a piece of software, it is not going to be perfect.
No.
It will be functional, and then we're going to add to it and add to it and add to it, but it will be functional when we get it finished.
Right.
We have a what we call an MVP, a minimum viable product concept. Right. And it's a lot harder for art.
Like, this is baseline what needs to do.
To make it functional, to gotta do this. And I get it's a lot harder for art because, like, I mean, art is art, right? But if you're looking at like from a pottery, okay, all right, come on.
I get what you're saying. Hold on, I'm gonna call you out on this because we have had this conversation. I say we because I know I've had like other Laurely friends who have had similar conversations with people recently. It's all about what the purpose is. So from a garb making perspective, you want something. You need new garb for an event, right? And maybe you need it for a specific event. So you have a deadline. Cool. You have some ideas about what that garb needs to do. Maybe you're going to be in the kitchen, so it needs to be kitchen garb, right? So it's got very, very specific job that it needs to do. Or maybe it's new fancy court garb. Cool. Specific job that it needs to do. It needs to look good or be functional or maybe both. And you have maybe some other features that you want it to have. Cool. At the end of the day, so long as it functions and covers your ass, and you feel good wearing it, it served its purpose.
Correct.
Not everything you make needs to be like, ANS top score, whatever worthy. It doesn't, and not everything is going to be.
Even with that garb, you can always go back and put new buttons or add trim or again.
Art is iterative. Yeah.
It's a minimum viable product. You have to have that tunic for that day. Right. So yeah, I think that's the concept. Is I've had to sort of tune back what I'm looking at when I'm saying, okay, I need pants by this day, I need tunics by this day, whatever. Yes, I want it to have these cool buttons and this cool trim and all this, but I need it by this weekend.
Yeah. What is feasible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. There's another quote in this section that I want to pull out, and it goes back to the perfection thing. To demand perfection is to deny your ordinary and universal humanity as though you would be better off without it. Yet this humanity is the ultimate source of your work. Your perfectionism denies you the very thing that you need to get your work done.
Yeah.
And that being graceful with yourself, you're human. This is okay. You are not a robot. You are not a machine. You know, production scribes, I'm looking at you. You're working on that scroll for court coming up in, you know, this weekend. You're not a robot. You're not a machine. If it doesn't get done, will somebody be sad? Maybe for 5 minutes or less. It doesn't matter. It'll get done eventually. It'll get to them on Tuesday. Don't stress yourself out about it.
To add to that, we have you and I both being from Meridiers in the Eastern Seaboard, the Eastern Coast and Southern Coast have a whole different concept about how we treat scribes too. Our scribes are panicked if it's not there the day of.
Yeah.
Go further west, they get them years later, if at all.
I have 2 scrolls on my backlog that are years. I mean, one of them I picked up like it was already overdue, but another one is years at this point.
Yeah. So, we've had a couple recently that that didn't get delivered on time and got delivered a couple quarts later because like the person got sick, like they ended up having COVID.
That's the thing. Stuff happens. We're human. And if somebody is going to be bitchy because they didn't get the scroll day of, that's on them. That's not on you. That's not on you.
You cannot control their response.
You are a human being. You are worthy of respecting yourself and respecting what your balance is. If you're stressed, and now I should say this, everyone works a little bit differently. There are some people who work really, really great under pressure. I have seen an amazing scroll come together an hour before court. That's awesome.
I don't work without a deadline, to be completely honest with you. There's a reason I schedule these shows and I don't wait till I'm done reading. It's because if I don't schedule a show, I will never pick up the book.
Yeah, no, completely get it. But my point is, there are people who work under stress really, really well. There are others who don't. And even if you think that you're one of those people who works under stress really well, that doesn't mean that you're not worthy of and deserving of and need rest.
Right.
Know yourself. Sorry, different soapbox, unrelated to book.
We did that book already, actually. Know yourself. We did that book. We covered that one. Yeah.
Sorry. It's okay. I wasn't here for that. It's okay. Yeah. Yes. And you have the power to manage the expectations that you have of yourself. And if there are external expectations that you need to meet and those need to adjust, have those conversations. I know they're hard. Have those conversations and have those expectations adjusted. You will gain more respect and all the things that come with that if you are just open about it.
Right.
And say, hey, I really tried. I need an extra day, or this is where I am in the process. It's not going to be done on Saturday. I can get it to them on Tuesday. Tell me where to ship it. You know, like there are things you can do. Like I said, having been a signet, having been a parchment, I would have way more respect for the scribe who was open with me on Tuesday about the thing they couldn't do than not hearing about it until Saturday morning. Right.
Yeah. Communicate early and often. Professional life, again, as a project manager, communicate early and often. Let me know you're failing so I can let the client know.
Exactly.
You know it's not going to happen.
Keep those lines open. Keep those lines open, and you will get grace handed back to you. You know, give grace to yourself. You will get grace in return from the people around you because they'll see you're setting up boundaries. You're taking care of yourself. You are the most important thing in this equation. You isn't, you know. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Can you pull up Lenore's thing?
Huh? Oh,
because I am proud of them. So these.
Hold on. Let me spotlight you because yes, they are important. That is murder goose. Yeah.
It's my murder goose. So I had my murder goose. They're wood, and I love them. They were a keychain, and I kept losing him. He literally kept falling off my keys. My murder goose. He's a little goose with a knife, and to the point where I lost him. I was just like, he wanted to be free. He's gone. I'm sad. And then he got found and returned to me, but not before some random person on Facebook, who not random, a friend of mine who would not identify themselves, sent me a new one. So then I had 2. And so I was like, I don't need 2 murder goose keychains. And so they became earrings. So now I have murder goose earrings.
That's appropriate for you. I also love Sylvie's comment here. I love deadlines, especially love the whooshing sound as they go by.
That comes down to that expectations.
Yeah.
So I'm new to this because I've not worked with software people in this capacity for very long, but there's a workflow called Agile, which is about that open communication and being able to reorient, adjust as stuff changes. Right. And so, yes, a deadline might be approaching, but be open and honest with the people who that deadline is for. You could probably get it extended because we're human. And I mean, I can't think of any, very, very few SCA contexts come to mind where that would actually be a big issue. And even then, no one is going to take away your birthday and no one's going to eat you, as our dear friend Wu would say.
Right. Well, the other side of the Agile conversation there is we either look at changing the deadline or we look at changing the requirements.
Right.
So we use promissory notes or like the paper plate scrolls that you see a lot. That's a thing, right? So yes, it's not the art thing.
And you do something else, and you let the person who's receiving the award know that there was a scroll coming, that it didn't make it in time, and they'll get it later. But you do that privately with that person, and it's not like a big deal in front of everybody, you know. And within the Scribble community, you are still respected because you let somebody know. You know, you don't get pushed off as like, oh, this person takes things and flakes out, you know, because that's a whole fear within the Scribble community. But anyway,
it's true. All right, I've got one more in this chapter. So what else you got? My next one's on 34.
34. My next one is on 31, but it's that sort of the seed of your next work is in your current work. It's the iteration thing again, so we don't need to go into that. We can go to is it in the magic?
Yeah, it's the last one of magic.
So okay, before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about annihilation.
Okay.
And it's talking about the stopping, like the full stopping, and about the person who is afraid of like the annihilation of not doing art anymore is maybe drawing that line between the doing and the being. That their identity is, they're wrapped up too tight in the identity of being an artist.
Yeah, they are the artist.
Right. But it talks about, or the quote is, annihilation is an existential fear, the common but sharply overdrawn fear that some part of you dies when you stop making art. And it's true. Non-artists may not understand that, but artists themselves, especially those who are stuck, understand it all too well. The depth of your need to make things establishes the level of risk in not making them. I had a conversation. So I've been married for over 10 years and my husband is not an arts person. Not really. You know, he does his own creating in a different way. He's a foodie. He's a wonderful chef. So every time we've moved, and we've moved a lot, he's always asked me to pare down the supplies. And it's always hard because they're the supplies. And I love the ability of getting an idea and, I have all of the things to make that already because they're in the supplies, you know? And he finally, and this is praise to my husband, who is lovely, you know, he's awesome. He's my husband. He finally got it. Like, this is just how your brain is. You need this. This is part of breathing, basically. Right. And he sees the ups and the downs. And when I'm in the creative, it's explodey, right? Like this is very clean. It's very clean right now. It explodes, as I'm sure all of you, have experienced with your workplaces. It explodes. But then that ends and you maybe have time to clean up, and then it might be clean for a while before it explodes again, but it'll eventually explode again, because you get itchy. You get itchy. You get new project itch, right? In some way, shape, or form.
Don't look at my garage. It's a thing. We get so Keith and I will spend a day cleaning the garage, and then something will happen, and it explodes. And she goes, "We just cleaned this," and I was like, "Yeah." And then we did something.
And then you did something.
Yeah.
But that's just part of the art brain, is the. And that goes back to the quote from the beginning of the chapter that I highlighted. It's, you reach a point where it's like you need to do something because it's an outlet. It's right. Whether it's a self-expression thing or it's just you need to do it. You want to make a thing to make a thing. I love making things to give to people. I love the joy, whether it's just this cool stupid drawing I made or something I make for my kids or something I make within an SCA context. I love making people smile. And that involves googly eyes a lot of the time, because those are fun.
Yep.
So yeah, but you get to a point when you're not able to do art for a while for whatever reason, it's hard. It's hard. Yeah. But then, and especially when you're not able to do it because of some weird brain spiral that you are on, because then you are both wanting to do the thing, but you're also the person preventing yourself from doing the thing.
Right.
And it's hard. That's why this book is so good. Sorry.
That's okay. That's again, there's passion here. There's a reason we're doing this.
Yeah. Where are we going next?
Magic.
All
right. So, and this is my last one because it's magic and expectations, and then we have a conversation real fast about that. All right. So whatever they have is something needed to do their work. It wouldn't help you in your work even if you had it. Their magic is theirs. You don't lack it. You don't need it. It has nothing to do with you. Period. So this to me is the idea of, and as like said earlier, it's really funny that as like said this, being a magician too, that other people's art is always better, or they've got the better tools. But your art is your art. Yeah. Their art is their art. You cannot compare the two.
Yeah. Even if you did. So this is okay. We run into this a lot. I keep coming back to Scribble. So in the SCA context of Scribble, we work from extants a lot of the time, right? And I used to have this concept of, oh, somebody did that extant for a scroll, whatever. That means I can't.
Right. No. That project's been done already.
It's been done, and sure, if I did it and I put it out there as a scroll, someone's going to say, oh, that's just like so-and-so scroll. And maybe if it happened like within a week of each other, that might be weird. Like, you wore that dress and I just wore that dress, and we showed up at the, and that's a girl thing. I don't know if guys worry if like they both show up at the same thing, like wearing the same shirt? Like,
we only have one shirt actually. All of us have one shirt. It's just we just wear the same one.
We share it like sisterhood, like the brotherhood of the shirt. Sorry. I need a moment. No, but there's definitely
ask your husband. He will agree with me.
I know he has more than one shirt.
It's just one shirt. It's an illusion. It's all an illusion. It's an illusion.
I'll go check my closet tonight and just see if I can touch all the shirts. Anyway, and maybe this is just a me perspective, which is entirely possible. The only head I live in is my own. Right. So, but I've always had the sense that somebody did that thing, or actually early on I had the sense somebody did that thing. That means I can't. Bullshit. Yes, I can. Like I can do it. And if it just sits in my little Scribble folder for a while and then I pull it out later, sure, cool. Make blanks for yourself. Sorry, weird things. So yeah, that's a whole weird. You can still do it because even if you do the cool squashed bug skull, the black and pink beautiful late period thing, it's gonna look different from the one that so and so did 6 months ago because you did that one and they did that one, and you're different people.
Right. Well, in your journey,
and they're both going to be great.
Right. But we talked about earlier about the journey. Your journey to there is going to be different. So especially if in this case we're doing documentation, you're submitting it for an A&S thing or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Your documentation is going to be different. Your process is going to be different, and you're going to find out something they didn't find out because they had some talent you don't have. They had some artist thing you didn't have. They had some material you didn't have, or you had something they didn't have, or whatever.
And you can learn from each other. And if somebody enters something or you see something in an A&S fair that is similar to something that you do, go read that thing. You might learn something from it. Go have a conversation with that person. Make a friend. Go make a friend.
Yep.
Yeah. I keep losing my spot. Sorry.
34 is where we are.
34. That's right. I love that quote. That's such a good quote. We get into more, what you need for the next piece is contained in the last piece. Your work tells you about your working methods, your discipline, your strength, your weaknesses, your habitual gestures, your willingness to embrace. Ask your work what it needs, not what you need. Then set aside your fears and listen the way a good parent listens to a child. because what you need and what your work needs are different.
I
don't know what that feels like from a fighty concept, but I imagine it has a feel.
Ow. Yeah, that hurt. I need to block better, apparently, and that hurt. Yeah, no, because so there's certain things that you do, right? Whatever your art form is, again, that I want to do this, but it doesn't want to do that. It's going to do this instead. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter how many times I make it do that. It's never going to do that because that's not what that thing does, right? It's, that's not what your arm does. It's not what your wrist does. Not what your sword does. Whatever. For 100 reasons. So you have to then adapt to what the work is doing to make the thing do something useful for you, right? Yeah. So Sifa said, fabric talks. If you don't listen, it gets mad, then it gets messy. She's right. It gets messy.
And you can't blame. Then that's when we come back to the blaming your materials. But getting frustrated with materials can be one of those symptoms of that stuff. It's not the material. You just need to learn, and that's not. I'm not coming at you. That's. It's okay. It's literally it's okay to start again. Please start again. It's okay to have stops and starts. One of my favorite entries over the last few years that I did was a pair of Han Dynasty shoes, lovingly called the banana slug shoes because they're yellow. And they have pointy bits on the end, a little bit like banana slugs. My banana slug shoes. Anyway, they're lovely. They're from the Mabangandui tune. I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry. But I made those shoes. I can't remember how many times. There are 2 versions of it that are the shoe and like 12 attempts at making cloth shoes. Like, just in general, just out of just stupid cotton fabric, like how does this work? Because they have the little turny uppy toe, and I was like, how does this work? Not just that, I had to teach myself how to make shoes, but I included all of that in my documentation. Like here's a picture of the 12 different pairs of shoes that I tried to make, lined up with each other, because I had to teach myself that. I had to teach myself. And then I learned from that first judging, oh, hey, the sole looks like it's woven, like it's basically like a woven band. Mm-hmm. And what is that? How would that dictate? How would that affect how the fabric moves, type of fabric, for the outers and everything, all of those conversations, all of those teased out threads that me, as someone who had never made shoes before, went like, oh, and latched onto for the next iteration. Which was called On the Other Foot, because your A&S documentation should have a fun title. Nice. There are so few joyous things in life. So yeah, I love seeing, just because you enter it into something doesn't mean you can't enter that project again when you take it to that next level,
Well, and you should. That's part of the purpose of it. So that's why we have 30 regional fairs and then the big one every year.
Even if it's honestly, I don't know how I feel about you can't enter this in more than one, kingdom regional. I understand why they have those rules, but I think that when you have an iterative project where, like, if I took my very, very first shoes and I entered it, year after year after year, that'd be one thing. But it's literally, here's my first attempt, and the back half of my binder is the first attempt's documentation, and here's my second attempt with the second shot. You're building on that foundation, you're building that scaffolding, and I think that that's something that should be encouraged. The first time that you make, I don't know, Italian Renaissance clothing is going to be different than the 10th time you make it, because it is, for lots of reasons.
That's true. All right. So we are just under 2 hours,
and we still have 2 sections left in chapter, and then the first part. So I don't know what you want to do.
So let's go ahead and you and I find a date. So we'd already scheduled a part 2 for, I think, for a month out, but let's maybe pick one up between now. You and I will talk about that offline. We'll go ahead and do a part 1.2, I guess. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
I know that it's slightly different than what you've done in the past, but I know that there was at least one comment. I think it was from Gwen in the chat earlier about maybe turning this into a panel.
Sure.
I realize that might slow us down a little bit, but I do think that would be, I think getting more voices on this on the stream would also be kind of neat.
Well, and I commented to her that I'm happy to do that. And I'm curious because I sometimes I don't really know what the comment was on, like what part of this, whether it was a whole conversation or something in particular. So if you want to reach out to her and y'all have that conversation about what the panel, I'm happy to provide the space and push the buttons for y'all to talk.
I like you, but I say that I like having your perspective too, because you're coming at it. You have a different perspective.
Right.
You are the person that lives inside your head. I don't live inside your head. I don't want to.
It's a scary, dark place in there. Don't do it.
Right?
We'll do it. So, and on that note, actually, you and I have a project we're working on at the moment that we haven't touched since before golf course. We're going to work on that again.
Well, because people went to golf course. Because
the golf course happened and it exploded, and then now here. So real quick on that, and then we'll figure out a date for things. So those out there watching, and there's still 14 of you still here. We had 22 people at one point watching live. That's amazing. Nice. By the way, so thank you for that. If you are interested in doing a 5-minute presentation on something on a weird version of the Gong Show, reach out to me, reach out to Marty, and we will put you into a Discord. Basically, the idea is we're going to do you get a 5-minute talk about whatever the hell you want to, whatever concepts, and do a PowerPoint on it. It's a PowerPoint party. We're going to throw up your own StreamYard and have fun with it. And there'll be sound effects and whatever. So
you only get 5 minutes. You get
5 minutes exactly.
Minutes.
There will be
and I will say, Cal is being more generous because when I initially pitched this, it was 3 minutes. He gave you more.
Because technology reasons. I'm giving you more because technology reason. Because we're doing if we were live and in person, it'd be 3 minutes. But because you get 5.
Your time doesn't start until you start presenting.
Correct.
I'm not, come on.
So basically, the idea is you're going to come on, you'll do an introduction, talk about yourself for a second, and then we're going to go, okay, go, and you talk for 5 minutes. So reach out to us if you have a topic for that. We'll throw you in the chat, and then we're going to organize them based on topics. Do a Scrabble night, do a clothing night, do something. We'll see who all's there first.
So just so people understand the vibe too. This all started because Goblin Shorts, and forgive me, I do not know her actual SCA name. She's Goblin Shorts. Shared her forbidden SCA class titles, like things she should teach that she shouldn't teach. On a TikTok video, and I was like, yeah, I got some of those too. And then it kind of just evolved from there of other people who are like, yeah, I've got classes that I could teach it. But yeah.
Yep. Yes, you should.
That's the vibe.
Yeah, pull out your weird topics, guys. This is gonna be fun.
The weird things that you don't need to spend an hour talking about in a formal SCA class, but you could totally spend 5 minutes. So yeah.
Oh, cool. All right. So be looking for a part 2 to part 1 for this show. We'll follow up and finish this. It's okay. No, you never know how these are going to go. And I was like, we started.
Okay. So for being, what did we say? It was 122 pages with the postscript. Yeah. For being such a little book, there's so much.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah. There's so much in it. And I cannot.
It's a quick read, but a lot of.
It's not even quick. It's because you have to, it's very easy to read. It's not stuffy or anything like that. We read quotes from it. It's very, very easy to access. Amber wants me to talk about Cotton.
I'd say it. All right.
Maybe, I don't know. I get angry. I might make just a Facebook or not a blog post about it. Anyway, so yeah, it's so chock full of stuff that it's you, like Cal was saying, you read it and then you just kind of get gut punched and you have to sit with it for a minute and just be like, oh wow, and think about it and digest it. I have a feeling that this is a book that I've only had it for a year and a half or so, but I have a feeling that it is a book that I'm probably going to put in my rotation and read like once every couple of years just to remind myself of stuff.
And that's smart. It's smart to do with any books like this. And I think you mentioned earlier too, this it's now on your, like, when you have apprentices, it's required reading for them.
I'm curious, and maybe between now and the next time that we meet to talk about it, if people have the answers to this question that they would want to share, other peers or people who aspire to peerage, is there a book that, you know, you would want an associate of yours to, like, do you have an associate reading list? You know, like, what do you want them to have read, or what do you want them to read on their journey that you think would be beneficial? Or does that change for every person? It might change for every person.
So anyway. I will put that, actually, I'll do probably like Wednesday, I'll put a post out, and we can do that on the page and collect an answer there. So look for that post out on the page. Let's see. So there's shows coming up, guys. I'm not going to bother promoting them because I promoted them last night. Go check Kalbardra's Corner on Facebook. All the events are there. Sunday, and then the 3-4 Fat Guys coming up, and youth activities and all that. And there'll be more of this. Ouyang, you're amazing. I love you. You're the best.
You're awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. This was really fun and exciting. And I'm going to go to bed now.
Yeah, it's late for you. So, guys, this has been Ouyang and Kal and Kalbardra's Corner. Have a good night.
Bye.